Hi, everybody, and welcome to the end of week 10 and the beginning of our last discussion week, week 11, on online design principles. I just want to make some comments about the week we've just had on talking about community, which is a very key concept, really, I think, for thinking about these ideas and thinking about learning broadly. Thank you first to Alison and Andrew for their an interesting week looking at different models of community, and I like the Venn diagram approach. It introduced a nice variation into the process of discussing articles, so that was a good kind of introduction. And there's also a very nice joke that you used in here, which I appreciate a lot. And if you don't mind, with proper credit to whoever it came from, I may show to my face-to-face class that which we're finishing up too next week. The one about do what I say, but to be, self-determining. So a few comments on the ideas that we talked about this week. I'm back now. I'm back from Brazil, as you can probably tell. It's even on the computer, it looks sort of grey. I'm sitting here watching the snow and thinking, wow, boy, what a difference a couple of days makes. The first concept I want to talk about this week, though, is metacognition, because I think it's one of the key learning outcomes we need to facilitate in students, regardless of the level at which we teach. I think being aware of when you do and you don't know what you understand. That's my dog. She's taken to making these conversational turns. When I'm talking, or if people are there having a conversation, she inserts these kind of moaning noises into the conversation. It's really quite weird. It's something new she started. So if you hear that again, that's what it is. So between being able to distinguish, between deep and superficial levels of understanding, another very key bit, being able to create generative questions that are not just yes/no things, but how can I pursue my understanding from this level to the kind of next level? And these are to me are the heart of what are transferable learning skills. I mean, it's in some sense, part of that is also needed for critical thinking. It's part of metacognition. It's part of critical thinking, but it's also part of any kind of effective learning in any kind of context, I think. And in collaborative context, during discussions with one another, like we do in this class, we also become aware of Sooty. We also become aware of differences in the way that we understand an idea in relation to another member of the community. So this lets us reconsider, it lets us ask questions, to challenge and so test our own understanding. So, discussion really supports, I think, the development of metacognition, because it has this, because that's what you do in that environment. And as I did say, these are three very different takes on community. I think what they all have in common is that they think community is really important for learning. And it's just that they talk about the nature of the community elements in slightly different ways. So the community of inquiry model, they really like this balance between social, cognitive, and instructor presence. And, and they argue that to be effective, those things have to be operating together for, effective learning to take place. In practice fields or communities of practice, it was interesting that all of you picked ownership of inquiry as the key important feature, because I think it is. I mean, but again, it's related to metacognition too, right? You've got to kind of know where you're going, and you've got to be able to steer your own ship, to use an analogy. But and that's something that we can help our students acquire, I think. And I think this is one of the most important, the key features in Scott Amelia's article on collective cognitive responsibility too. And I would say that idea of ownership of your own inquiry is also the central idea in knowledge building communities, because it's that pursuit of kind of authentic understanding that is the fuel for working collectively in a group, and everybody contributing their own sort of piece to the idea. and working together as a kind of community of inquiry, even though, or knowledge building community, I should put more properly. So while it does take a long time to release that kind of learning ownership, because our school system has a power structure and a hierarchy, which is based essentially in the opposite direction, because it encourages teacher control over everything, both the content, which arguably is going to continue, but also the process of inquiry skills. And I think, and it seems to me that my experience of teaching in all sorts of different contexts, that some students, regardless of their age, seem to gravitate more naturally to that ownership, and others it takes longer and they're less confident. But I think that so much of that is so affected by their school experience and how much kind of agency they've been given in the past. And if they haven't, well, that's not what the rules are. They learn to play the rules of the game that they're taught, and whatever that is, and that's what they do. So, and of course, the other thing is that huge component of being able to successfully take over ownership of inquiry is your metacognitive skill level, right? So that those concepts are very deeply interrelated. So there does seem to be a lot of individual variability in metacognition. And so, but I think that it is something that we can teach, and we need to be teaching, and we need to kind of keep an eye out for always. So in my sort of over the span of time I've spent teaching, I've always talked to students about how they would go if they have difficulty with this idea, or they're not showing much metacognitive kind of ownership. That's in the particular formal setting. I often talk to them about how they'd go about learning something if they were at home and pursuing an interest of their own. And I think even troubled or alienated students, or students with various kind of diagnosed learning issues, usually can discuss some effective learning that they've undertaken in their own situation, out of school context, based usually on their own interests, obviously. But if you can talk explicitly to students about the strategies they use in those settings, and that takes a bit of time sometimes, because they don't think about it as that, they just do those things, right, because they're interested. And then linking those explicitly to classroom strategies and saying, well, if you were doing that same thing when you were learning the history thing, we could have done this and this and this, so to try to make really clear parallels and links, I think that can help them frame school learning in a more kind of active and more participatory way. Many of those students have got hung up on the kind of power imbalance and have become somewhat hopeless and opted out. Even quite young students who have learning challenges, and I've worked with a lot of kids with all sorts of diagnosed learning disabilities, but they really can opt out a lot from psychologically from the classroom community. And I really liked some of the examples I saw in the discussions this week about how some of you have engaged students, or engaged the class to engage those students in working with students, who have exceptionalities of one form or another. Because I really think that community can provide that safe space, and it's a question of setting it in motion and creating the kind of expectation and the tools for how we go about doing that as a group, as a classroom group. And it does take a lot of leadership, I think, from the teacher, and a lot of confidence. Sometimes a harder thing for new teachers, I think, to establish, but certainly those of us who've been teaching a while, I think it's really a worthwhile kind of use of our time to do. And it shows the kind of power of modeling and good inclusion strategies, where open discussion and explicit valuing of particular inclusive ways of interacting are kind of modeled and available for students to see. Now, of course, it sounds quite straightforward, and I know the realities of many educational settings make that a difficult journey. And I think assessment is one of those pieces that often gets in the way, because it's required by external accountability measures, both within the institution and beyond, but doesn't seem to fit nicely with that much more organic, more authentic learning environment that you're creating in your own classroom community. And these are difficult challenges, and I think it takes a lot of time. And I think that's the part that's really not very clear, both in the literature that we read and and isn't something that's acknowledged enough, I think, in professional development work around these issues as well. I'm thinking, when I've watched this happen in knowledge forum classrooms, in the collective cognitive responsibility locations, it does take longer to get people up and learning in a different, more student-directed way. The younger they are, the faster it is. The older they are, the more difficult. But having them start with their own problems of understanding, which are linked topically to curriculum, so it's not like it doesn't pay any attention to curriculum objectives. But, like using tribes or other kinds of ways of learning how to collaborate or ways of interacting that are constructive and productive, it takes time, and it kind of I don't think there's a kind of quick way to do that. For instance, and in knowledge building classes, a lot of that time is early time is spent setting these values up and helping students learn how to be collaborative in constructive ways, and all that's done offline. And that when you set that kind of classroom ethos in a way around how you interact with people, how you treat other people's ideas, and that kind of thing. Then I think that you could then it also occurs more easily in the online part of the day, if you like, as they move between kind of activity frames. But I've also seen and done myself knowledge building teachers talk very explicitly about, for instance, the standardized tests that students have to take and how those may be very different from what is typically valued in our classroom here, or done as part of day-to-day learning in the classroom, but it's required. So that's a particular task. We have to pay attention to it, and we figure out what's the best way to do that. So I think you can blend those different goals. The key thing is that you as a teacher are clear about what you are valuing in the learning process, and also clear about the surrounding responsibilities that you also have to take care of, and so it can't always be one way. But if you're clear about why these things happen, I think that can still work. And so classroom community continues to be an important facilitator for learning, both in face-to-face and online, as a way to establish a context that supports and models the kind of learning you want to see happening in the classroom. And I think this idea, along with all the other concepts that we've talked about in the class to date, come together in the topic of our final discussion week. The final week, as you know, week 12 is all about your own papers, writing your final papers. So we're going to look now, though, at design principles in online environments. And I think those discussions about design principles should help you get ready for doing your final paper. There, we've set those up for the week, and the groups are ready to go. These design principles really do integrate a lot of the ideas that we've already kind of talked about. I mean, they may be implicit, but they're there. And they may also, if you're wanting to design an online environment, not everybody has to or does, but then that will be helpful. And Jason and Christine and Daniel are going to moderate our final week's discussion on these ideas. So I like this week because it's a kind of integrative week, and you can see if we can sort of put some of these ideas together and for good use in the final paper and beyond, because my bigger goal is that you take away this stuff and it's useful to you in your own professional and academic life as you continue through either your program and also your professional context. And just a quick note about final assignment planning. We're still doing that there. There's a start, stop, and continue note, so please do feel free to add some things. People had started a while ago when I first put it up, but you can have some start and stop things. We've got further in the course now. You may have things that you absolutely hate and things that you think I should be doing, and please put them in because they're helpful for me. I don't always do everything, but I really do take that seriously, and I've modified and designed this course. It evolves over time through the feedback that I get from students. So feel free to talk about anything. If there are particular readings you did or didn't like, those kinds of things, let me know. I appreciate that. And also you will be contacted, if you haven't already, by email by your uToronto account to to fill out a formal course evaluation set of questions. So please do that too, because that's really part of how we get judged, how we get sort of evaluated as faculty on an annual basis. All those comments and you know, all the questions you answer, all that gets summarized and used actually in our individual evaluations every year as part of the kind of a departmental level assessment of the faculty. So it's very important, and it's not ignored. It doesn't get dusty on the shelf, which of course would be difficult because it's digital, but you know what I mean. It's it's not a waste of your time. It actually factors in, and I read it all too. So it's very helpful. And I find the two together, the start, stop, and continue, and those are usually give me a lot of food for thought for how I can make courses better. So I think that's all for now, and I will talk to you more online soon during this week. And you know, people are sort of sending me questions. If you have more questions about your final project, let me know. I'm happy to answer them. Okay, have a lovely but snowy week, and take care. Bye-bye.